In tort law, not all damage caused by negligence will lead to liability. The famous case of Overseas Tankship Limited versus Mortsdock Engineering Company, better known as Wagon Mound No. 1, was decided in 1961. This case revolutionized the law of negligence by setting out the circumstances in which damage is too remote to be recoverable in negligence. Before we get into the details of the case, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. So now, let's get started. Background story. In Sydney Harbor, a ship owned by Overseas Tankship Limited was being refueled at the Mortsdock. During the refueling process, there was a spill of furnace oil from the ship's fuel tanks through a ruptured pipe. The oil spread across the surface of the water and reached the adjacent dock owned by Mortsdock Engineering Company. At this dock, workers were carrying out hot welding work. Now, at this point, I want you to pause the video and consider what kind of damage could be caused by an oil spill on water. What do you think would happen next? What damage could occur? You might say any damage caused by the oil on the water would be too remote to be reasonably foreseeable. But hold on, because this case involves a situation where the damage that occurred was not foreseeable at all. At the time, the general expert opinion was that furnace oil floating on water could not catch fire. Therefore, the fire risk from the welding sparks was not considered. Tragically, however, sparks from the welding work ignited cotton waste floating on the water, which in turn ignited the oil. A fire broke out as a result, destroying the wharf and causing significant damage. The key question in this case was whether the fire damage was too remote to be recoverable in negligence, even though the oil spill was not. Before we move on, please make sure to hit the like button. If you are enjoying this content so far, this helps me a lot and keeps me motivated to create more content for you guys. Issue. The main issue in this case was whether the defendant, Overseas Tankship Limited, was liable in negligence for the damage by fire, even though such fire damage was not reasonably foreseeable. Rule. In cases of negligence, the defendant is usually liable for damage that is a direct consequence of their wrongful act. However, the extent of liability cannot be unlimited. There must be a limit to what consequences can be considered too remote to be fairly and reasonably foreseeable. In this case, the Privy Council had to decide whether the fire damage was too remote to be recoverable in negligence. Previously, the courts in England had adopted a more expansive rule, namely that a defendant is liable for all direct consequences of their actions, even if they are not foreseeable. The leading case for this rule was Remoteness, 1921. Wagon Mound established that remoteness of damage must be limited by foreseeability, and damage that is too remote cannot be recovered in negligence. The court applied the test of foreseeability, asking whether a reasonable person in the defendant's position would have foreseen the risk of fire. Application. The court held that while pollution damage from the oil spill was foreseeable, fire damage was not. Even though the oil spill caused the fire, it was not reasonably foreseeable that it would ignite and cause a fire. At the time, scientific knowledge and common opinion suggested that furnace oil on water could not ignite. Therefore, the risk of fire was too remote to be foreseeable. Consequently, Overseas Tankship Limited could not have reasonably foreseen the risk of fire, and accordingly, the damage caused by fire was not recoverable in negligence. The court decided that Overseas Tankship Limited was not liable for the destruction of the wharf. Conclusion. The Wagon Mound case is one of the most important cases in tort law. It introduced the concept of foreseeability as the test for remoteness of damage, thus limiting liability in negligence to those consequences that are reasonably foreseeable. It overruled the earlier rule in Remoteness, which had a wider scope. It is well known for establishing the principle that not every conceivable consequence of a wrongful act is recoverable in negligence. It remains a cornerstone of tort law, serving as a reminder that legal liability has its limits. It reminds us that while negligence may establish a duty of care, the scope of that duty is limited to what is foreseeable. Law students around the world still read and discuss this case, and judges continue to refer to it when dealing with cases involving negligence and remoteness. And that's a wrap on another case brief. I hope you found this video helpful. If so, please make sure to leave a like, comment below, and subscribe to the channel. Sharing what you have learned with others is the best way to cement your learning. So grab your textbooks and study groups and get discussing. Until next time, happy law studying.